Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We are going to continue talking about archaeology, but we're going to go in a bit of a different direction. Now, for the last several broadcasts, we've been focusing on the very first DVD that I ever made in the spring of 1991, called Archaeology Confirms the Bible. And if you've listened to those 4 broadcasts, I think you agree with me. You have to get that DVD. You have to see what is on that DVD because it's some awesome stuff. I mean, we're talking about the tomb of Jesus, crossing side of the Red Sea, amazing archaeology stuff. Now, we put that together with, actually, there's 4 discs in this particular offer. You get Archaeology Confirms the Bible. That's the one we've been listening to here for the last week, made in 1991. It's awesome. And then I made another new one talking about Noah's Ark in October of 2012 called Noah's Ark Confirms the Bible. But what we're about to listen to today is from Michael Rood. He came in, he actually made 2 different discs, and the title has 2 different titles. One is Endtimes Archaeology. The other one is Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is an awesome gift offer for an awesome offer. You get 4 discs valued at $80 for a gift of $40. And Michael Rood's 2 DVDs are what we're about to listen to. So let me tell you about those. Michael takes you on one of the most thrilling archaeological discovery tours, basically, of modern-day Israel. He presents some of the most recent photographs and video footage and artifacts smuggled out of Saudi Arabia and displays, for example, a grinding stone from Mount Sinai, which probably was used to grind manna. You'll find that very interesting. Unfortunately, you can't see it on radio, which is why you got to buy the DVD set. He also shows Israeli arrowheads that litter the desert of Midian, intact remains of the altar made to the golden calf, the rock, this is the one that Moses struck at Rephadim, which split, of course, massive amounts of water, a river poured out of this giant rock. You're going to also see Har Karkum, one of Israel's camping locations during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. All kinds of amazing things. You got to get this gift offer. It's the archaeology gift offer. You can get it at prophecyclub.com or by calling 785-266-1112. 4 discs, 3 titles, valued at $80, gift of $40. Today we're going to go listen to Michael Rood speak on Endtimes Archaeology and the Dead Sea Scrolls. You'll find it fascinating.
The information that I have to share with you tonight, I believe, is going to shake the world. And that is why I have come from Jerusalem to do this. During this last period of time, we are now in the middle of our 3rd year of living in Jerusalem, where we are now producing 1/2-hour television programs, which will be airing on the Sky Angel television network and several other networks around the world. But the reason that we are in Jerusalem is because of that first Prophecy Club video that was done. During the tour, I got a call from Costa Rica asking if I would come down and teach more about the Feast of the Lord to a group of ultra-Orthodox Jews, Lubavitchers. Now, when I received the call, I did recall that in Cleveland, many nights we'd have 300-400 people in the audience, and there would be 3-4 rows of black hats, ultra-Orthodox, black hats, peyotes, the black coats, and at the end of the meeting they would always come up and ask very respectful questions. And so when I was invited to go to Costa Rica to teach, it surprised me a little bit. And so I asked them why it was, when I went down there finally, why it was that they wanted to hear more about these feasts of the Lord. And they said that when we watched the video, we could tell within the first 15 minutes that from what you were teaching, that the Christians would finally understand and have respect for the Jewish people. And so that was quite a revelation to me, and so that was the reason why I was down in Costa Rica. But it seems there was another reason. Because a gentleman who was the professional Spanish voice for Robert Schuller, Jack Hayford, Jack Van Impe, and a number of American evangelists, he was their voice in the Spanish language for the largest Spanish Christian television network on the planet. And he saw this video and went to the owners of the network and said, "This is the message I've been waiting for my entire life. I am not going to be Robert Schuller's voice anymore. This person, I want to be their voice." And it was from watching that first Prophecy Club video. Roberto Omania joined us in Israel with Chaim Goldman, who is a television producer who the three of us moved to Israel. But before we moved, when we were down in Costa Rica, we were asked if we would produce 1.5-hour television programs for the network detailing the Feast of the Lord. Because all of my videos were quite long, they wanted them in 1.5-hour blocks, and so we agreed, and we were offered a brand new television studio, completely equipped, and we said, no, we believe that we should go to Israel and film it in Israel. We want to take Israel out to the rest of the world. As the scripture says, that the word of the Lord will go out from Zion, his Torah from Jerusalem. And we felt that we should be there. And they said, it's dangerous over there. I guess they'd been watching CNN or something. And I said to them that I believe that the safest place for me to be is in the will of God. So we all packed up. We moved to Jerusalem. And after we began our filming, we were about a half year into the first season of filming. And in January, it was a very cloudy week. It was snowy. It was rainy. And we can't do any filming. We can't plan on it because we have no idea what the weather's going to look like. But on Sunday morning, January 27th, it was a beautiful Sunday morning in Jerusalem. The birds were singing. The sun was out. It was a lovely day. And Chaim Goldman decided that he was going to take a walk. So he left the house, and a couple hours later I thought, well, I'd like to go downtown Jerusalem. It was about a 3-mile walk. I thought I'd go down to the Hillel Cafe and get a cup of coffee. So 2 hours after Chaim left, I left. I went downtown. I hadn't seen him in 3 hours at this point. But as I was walking down Jaffa Street, I remember it was so crowded. The streets were just bustling with people. And as I went down the street, I saw that around this bus stop, there were so many people waiting and so many people coming up the street that I really couldn't even walk on the sidewalk around behind the bus stop. I had to walk out into the first lane of traffic. There wasn't anyone coming, so I stepped out into the street. I walked around the bus stop, and just as I got around it and started to step up onto the curb, right directly in front of me at Jaffa 50 was a shoe store that had Na'ot sandals. Now, when I saw that, I remembered that a couple days before, Chaim said that he needed to get his Na'ot Israeli sandals resold. And so it caught my eye, and as I stepped in toward the front of the building, and I took about 4 more steps, and as I looked into the front window of the store, as I was still walking, the entire front of the store just dissolved in front of me as a fireball went past and blew the entire front of the store out. A cloud of black soot and smoke completely covered over me, and the smell of burning flesh and burning hair filled my nostrils. And as the smoke cleared, I looked to my left, and just about 15 feet away, there was a man in the street with the pants shredded from his legs. Both of his legs were blown off, and his right arm was blown off, and just the stubble of his arm remained, and it was on fire, and he flailed for just a second, and wham, he was out. He was dead. I looked back, and I looked at myself, and I saw that I was all there, but I was deafened from the concussion. I could hear the muted screams of people, but I couldn't hear anything else. And then I heard a voice very clearly, very calmly, very distinctly, "You are here to help." I looked to my left, and a young woman's head was laying at my feet. I'm beyond her, arms and legs laying in the street, and I knew there was nothing I could do to help her or the man that lost both of his legs and his arm just a few feet away. But I looked on past her, and an Israeli soldier was blown to his back. His pants were melted up past his knees. His hair and his beard were gone, but just the stubble was smoking. He was covered with blood, and he started to struggle, and so I leaped over the woman's head. I got down on my knees just as he started to struggle to get out, and he looked at me, and he said in English, which surprised me, "Am I hurt?" And I set him up the rest of the way, and I ran my hands over the front and over the back of him, and took his right hand, and I placed it over a gash above his right eye, and I said, keep pressure on this. You've got to cut above your right eye, but you're okay. You're going to be okay. This is not your blood. And right now, we are fractions of a second into this whole incident, and I pointed to my left at an M16 that was about 6 feet away, and I said to him, is that your rifle? Now, this rifle had the military nylon shoulder strap just shredded from it. And any of you who have been in the military know what kind of pressure it takes to shred a nylon shoulder strap. He said, when I asked if that was his weapon, his M16, he said, yes. I said, I'm going to get it for you. I stayed on my knees and I crawled on the ground and got the strap by my thumb and forefinger, and I dragged it over to his side. I flipped it over and checked the magazine and safety. It was ready to go, and I said, I'm a U.S. Marine. If anything happens, I'll handle your weapon for you, okay? And he said, okay. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to explain that I'm a fat, old U.S. Marine. U.S. Marine just seemed to suffice at that moment because I have 4 daughters, and from when they were quite young, I always told them, if anything bad happens, if anything bad goes down, do not be like MacGyver. Don't try to do something fancy with a match and some hairspray and try to blow up a city block. Just get the gun. If something bad goes down, the good guys are the ones that need the guns. And so when I pulled it over to his side, I wanted to be ready because I have no idea what's going on at this time. I just know that there are arms and legs and dead people all around me. And right then, a gentleman came running across 4 lanes of traffic which were just dead stopped. The windows of buses and of vehicles were blown out. Across 4 lanes of traffic in each way, for 100 feet, all of the storefronts were completely blown away. Behind me, for 100 feet in each direction, the front of the stores were gone. In the next few minutes, 105 people are going to go to the hospital. Some of them not all intact. And just as this gentleman ran across the street, I saw he was wearing a white smock. He spoke to me in English, which indicated that he was probably a pharmacist. And he got over to this gentleman that I was helping that was covered in blood, and he asked me about him, and so I told him very quickly what the situation was, and so he began to attend this gentleman's wounds. I then swung around to the back, and another Israeli soldier whose pants were torn from his legs, his hair and his beard were smoking, and he had body pieces and blood all over the front of him, and 2 other Israelis got to him immediately. I swung to my left, and a young woman was entangled in a bunch of wires that were blown down from a concrete pillar, and she was tangled up in them, and I could see that she could not get through them. And so I got up and I went over, and as I approached, I could see that her pupils were completely dilated. She had no color in her eyes. And I assumed that she was blinded from the concussion because she couldn't see her way through this tangled web that had been blown down from the building. I grabbed her by the shoulders and I said, "Can you see me? Are you okay?" And she said, "My husband. I have to get to my husband. He's waiting for me right over there." And I looked down, and under her rib cage, her sweater was being soaked with blood. And I looked down, and protruding out of her thigh was a piece of plate glass about that square, sticking squarely out of the front of her leg, and that was also tangled up in these wires. And so I held her very firmly. I said, "You have some wounds, you're going to be okay, but you need to stay right here. You can't move." And she said, "No, I have to get to my husband. My husband's waiting for me." I said, "No," and I forcibly held her. I said, "No, you cannot move. I know she's in shock." I said, "You can't move. Your husband will come to you." And right then, she looked over my shoulder at the man in the street with both of his legs blown away. His arm was gone. She looked at him and she screamed out, "My husband! My husband! That's my husband!" And I took her head and I buried it in my chest. I said, Lord, show me how to comfort her. I don't know what to do." Right then, a young Jewish girl came up from behind and she said, "Is she hurt? Is she okay?" And I said, "She's got some wounds, but that is her husband." She looked at the man in the street and then came over and wrapped her arms around her sister. I stepped aside. The screaming has died down. There are police that are now rushing into the area. The sirens are blaring. And as I look around, I see that the living are being taken care of. And as I step back, I realize that this young woman's head laying on the ground is right in the evacuation path where the ambulances, the stretchers need to come in. And so I go over, I reach down, I pick up this young woman's head and I put it in my arms, and I look around and there's a piece of a blue banner that was blown down from the building, and I went and got the banner and I wrapped her head up as best I could, and I just imagined as I was holding this woman's head in my hands that this is a young Jewish mother with her children in school, her husband's at work, and on this beautiful Sunday morning, it'll be hours before they know that their wife, that their mother is dead. And this is all that I can think of as I had this woman's head in my hands. And I looked for a place to put it down, and I decided to go over and put it by a concrete pillar that's a little bit out of the way. And then I stepped back and I realized I just can't leave her head there, because when they begin to clean up, when someone picks up that banner, then they're going to see that head, and it just can't be treated like this. So as the Israeli police were coming in, I got a hold of the senior officer and I said, I wrapped up a woman's head and I put her head over by that pillar. And the officer said, lo mavin anglit, I don't understand English. And for the life of me, I couldn't think of, the head of a woman, Rosh Isha, to save my life at that moment. I was a little bit shaken by this thing. And so I said it very slowly, and then I gestured, and then I could tell by the look on his face, when he said, head of a woman? I said, yes. I could tell that he then understood. And he shook his head, and then I stepped back. I knew then, as the stretchers were coming in, as the ambulances were pulling up from both directions, it's just time for me to leave. And so I walk away. I get about a block away, and I stop, and I realize I better take a closer look at myself. And I looked down at my sandaled feet, the same sandals that I'm wearing now, and looked at me. And, I had little pieces of flesh and blood all over the front of me, and I held out my hands, and it surprised me. I was rock steady. I didn't even have an adrenaline rush going on. I then walked the 3 miles back to the apartment, which was a long, long walk, because it's hard having to relive that moment, that time in which all this happened, and holding that woman's head in my hands. I just kept reliving it with every step, and it was so hard to make that walk back. And when I got back to the apartment, I looked up the 4th story, that's where the apartment was, and I saw Roberto, our Spanish producer from Costa Rica, looking out the window at me, and he disappeared when he saw me. I climbed the stairs, got to the door, and he opened the door and said very, very calmly, he said, Chaim is okay, but he's at the hospital. He has a piece of glass shrapnel in his forehead from a bomb that went off downtown Jerusalem. And I raised my hands, which are covered in blood, and I said, I know, I was there. But I hadn't seen Chaim in over 3 hours. How is it that Chaim was involved in this? I took my clothes off, asked Roberto to get them down to the dry cleaners. We just had to get them out of the house. The smell of that burning flesh was just nauseating. And as he took them out of the apartment, I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and there was not a single hair on my head that was singed. See, when we found out what happened later that afternoon, Chaim came back from the hospital, and his fiancée was getting ready to board a plane the next morning in Miami to fly to Israel for them to become betrothed and for them to start their life and their family in Jerusalem. So this is a very sobering moment at this point, that he's going to bring the woman that he loves over to Israel, and he has just gone through this and seen these same things. And we began then to relate our stories back to each other, and we found out then what happened. Because that morning, Chaim was walking down Jaffa Street, and as he went by the front of Jaffa 50, the shoe store, he saw a sign for Now sandals. Knowing that he needed to have his sandals resoled, he went in and spoke to the gentleman who was the store owner. And he was standing in the store when a young woman brought in a bag. She set it on the floor. She took a few steps back, and the cashier said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" She flustered. She picked up the bag and walked out the door just as I passed. I took 4 more steps, and on my 4th step, I was squarely on the other side of a 16-inch wide concrete pillar. She took 4 more steps, and the bomb went off. And the entire blast blew completely past me, blew the entire front of the store in, and on the other side of a solid wood wall, that is where that glass shrapnel went through and cut Chaim in the forehead. Chaim immediately began to assist the wounded on the inside. You know, if I were praying that morning and I heard a voice from heaven, "Rood, Rood," that's what he calls me. He knows how I act. He knows my name. "I want you to walk downtown Jerusalem today, and I am going to blow up the largest bomb that's ever been blown up by a terrorist in downtown Jerusalem, just a few feet away from you. People that are further away from the bomb are going to have their legs and arms blown off, but I'm going to show you that not a hair of your head will be singed, that I am able to protect you." If I heard that in a revelation, a voice from heaven that morning, I believe that I would still be under my bed today. There is no way that I would ever want to walk into a situation like that knowing what is about to take place. Chaim Goldman would never have wanted to walk into a situation like that if we would have known what was going to take place. But that is exactly what happened. The Almighty took us to that place right downtown Jerusalem and showed us that He is able to protect us. And it was Roberto who said and reminded us that the safest place for us to be is in the will of the Almighty. When we are doing His will, He is able and He will protect us. And even though that there is violence and there are enemies in the land of Israel, there have always been enemies in the land of Israel. From when we left Egypt and crossed the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, the Amalekites were attacking the women and children who were straggling. The Amalekites are still doing it today. Of course, about 40 years ago, the name was changed from Amalekites to Palestinians, which, before then there was no such thing as a Palestinian, but all of a sudden now there is, because it's politically advantageous to the New World Order, the United Nations, to create a people called Palestinians. But they continue to do what they've always done. In the next couple of days, we then get the full detail of what happened. That woman that came in and set down that bag in that shoe store was not supposed to be the first Palestinian female suicide bomber. She was a nurse, one that's sworn to do no harm. She brought that bomb in that morning on a Red Crescent vehicle. A Red Crescent vehicle, the Arab version, the Palestinian version of the Red Cross, which is funded by the International and the U.S. Red Cross. She brought that bomb into Jerusalem. She armed it. She walked into that store, set it down, and she was walking out. All she wanted to do was murder innocent women and children. She had no intention of dying herself. And there's no way to describe, no way to understand why she picked that bag back up, walked out of the building. Because if that bomb would have gone out where it was, Chaim would be dead, I would be dead, and probably 24 women and children. Now you understand when you listen to CNN and you hear people whining about the Israelis stopping the Red Crescent vehicles and searching them. They're doing it for a reason. It's because they use these to murder innocent women and children. And the Israelis have always had a very measured response to every one of these attacks. A response that the United States can't even relate to. The Israelis have lost more people in this intifada per population than what went down in the World Trade Centers in America. And what does the U.S. do? They carpet bomb an entire nation. And then they take on another one, and they're talking about taking on a third one at this point. Israel's response has been extremely measured, aggravatingly so, especially to those who live there and have to put up with this on a regular basis. The Almighty made a promise to Abraham and to Abraham's offspring that all of the land from the river Euphrates, which takes up half of Iraq, all the way to the river in Egypt, the Nile, all of that land belongs to Abraham's children. And no roadmap to hell is going to change it. Now, isn't that, that's what we call it in Israel. Don't you call it the roadmap to hell here in America? Well, that's what the prophet Isaiah called it. He said that Israel's leaders would do wickedly against the covenant that God made with Abraham. And that they would trade, they would give over a part of this land for the promise of peace from the world government. Isaiah, by revelation, calls this an agreement with hell and a covenant with death that the Almighty will annul. And so it doesn't matter how many times they come up with a new covenant, it will be annulled by the Almighty. To understand that covenant that the Almighty made with Abraham, and what that has to do with the last days, the time in which we live right now, the Almighty has kept something in reserve, an archaeological find in reserve that has now only been revealed.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt right there, but it is important that you get this particular gift offer. It's called Archaeology Gift Offer. You get 4 discs, 3 titles. 3 titles are Archaeology Confirms the Bible. That was made in 1991 by me when I went to Noah's Ark and Crossing Side of the Red Sea, all kinds of amazing things, Sodom and Gomorrah, lots of stuff. Then I made another DVD in 2012 called Noah's Ark Confirms the Bible, talking about what we saw in Noah's Ark. Then we had Michael Rood in to make a double DVD set called Endtimes Archaeology and Dead Sea Scrolls. All 4 of those DVDs valued at $80 for a gift of $40, and I promise you, you will be glad you got this set. I mean, there's things on here that you will not hear anyplace else. You will really, really like this. You get it at prophecyclub.com, Archaeology Gift Offer, or by calling 785-266-1112. Archaeology Gift Offer. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers, and thank you for your regular monthly support. God bless. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. The next speaker at the Prophecy Club is Brian Melvin. He was an atheist that drank contaminated water and died. He tells what it's like to die and stand before judgment, then be sent to hell with demons tormenting him. Worse than your worst nightmare. First talk is Hell in a Box. Topics: reliving my evil past, what it was like to die, first tricked inside a cell, tour of the pit, woman arriving in a cell, sex offenders in hell, rescue by Jesus. Then he was taken to heaven. Next talk is From Hell to Heaven. Topics: life after hell, the PSTD of hell, translated to heaven, match it with the Bible, Jesus the Son of Man, land of liquid love, field of reunion and reconciliation, know everything in heaven, the grand estates, the river of life, glowing for 3 days upon his return. That's Brian Melvin, Sunday morning, April 30th, at the Prophecy Club, 2540 K Avenue in Plano. Be seated at 8:30, speaking from 9 to noon. No charge. The DVD Hell in a Box and Hell to Heaven, gift of $30. His book A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion, gift of $20. Get both of them at prophecyclub.com for a gift of $45, or call 785-266-1112, the Brian Melvin gift offer. DVD 30, book 20, both gift of $45, Prophecy Club, or 785-266-1112, Brian Melvin gift offer.